Hello and welcome to the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast with me, your host, Tim Stillman, stepping in for Emile Smith. We don't know why he's ducked this episode, but he was sporting a crowbar and he said something about going to see a guy called Mo. So I don't really know what that's about. I haven't really joined up the dots there. And he said something about a guy called Trent as well. I really don't know what he was babbling about, but he had a steel crowbar and he said he had to see a couple of guys called Mo and Trent. So I am stepping in to the presenting chair while he takes care of that business, whatever it is. Obviously, Arsenal have got a massive game coming up on Sunday against Liverpool. We had a very big game against Nottingham Forest on Tuesday. We will meld those concepts and talk about both of those games. But with the Forest game, because we did the instant reaction, because it was 48 hours ago now as we record, we'll go like quite big picture and not pick out the incidents and pick the bones out of the Forest game. And obviously we'll look ahead to the Liverpool game on Sunday. And obviously today, as we record, is transfer deadline day. And obviously it's very, very busy. There's so much happening. We can hardly keep up with it all. I believe Runarsson is gone. We'll probably do a special Patreon pod on Runarsson and the Arsenal legacy that he leaves. Speaking of Patreon content, for those of you who haven't seen it, we have the Clive Palmer Director of Football episode up on our Patreon. So for those of you who don't know, essentially each of us, and I haven't had my turn yet, is going to play Director of Football, and we're going to talk a little bit about squad building, who we'd sell, where we'd buy, etc., etc. So the episode with Clive is up on Patreon. And speaking of Clive, I'm joined by Paul, who you can follow on Twitter at Poznan in my pants. Hello, Paul.
Woohoo! Can't wait for my shot at Director of Football.
Yeah, as someone who is neurodivergent, I don't think that episode's going to go very well for me. But I am joined by Clive, who you can follow on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello. And I've got more ideas for that Director of Football stuff. I've got other lists. I did 3 lists, completely smashed the format as is normal, but I've got others. So I may send them out.
Do your other ideas involve never work with Emile Smith if I am indeed promoted to Director of Football at Arsenal?
I'm not taking his rubbish when it comes to wages and transfer fees. What does he know? So we had a good battle, good fun.
Indeed. Right. So let's start with some of the bigger picture stuff, I guess, emerging from the Nottingham Forest game on Tuesday night, which we won 2-1. Maybe a few kind of bigger themes, bigger threads to pull at. And Paul, I'm going to start with you on this one. Now, Elliot put to me in the last podcast the question, how many games do you see Emile Smith Rowe starting for the rest of the season? And I said,
such a bastard.
I said 1, and that quota has now been used up because Emile Smith Rowe started at Nottingham Forest. And I do think there's something slightly interesting here in certain types of away game. We started Vieira at Everton. We started Trossard in that position at Brentford. We started Smith Rowe there for this game, and they're all fairly similar types of opponent. And I do think there's perhaps something about playing a more ball-dominant guy in that role ahead of Havertz for certain types of away game. But for you, Paul, first of all, how surprised, if at all, were you to see Smith Rowe in the starting lineup? And for you, do you think this is perhaps the beginning of a revival? Do you not think it's a revival at all, and perhaps it was all fitness-based all this time, and this is him edging his way back in? Or is this one last geyser in the desert?
So it's just fascinating, right? It's just fascinating because what is it? What has it been? What was going on? He was this force for us. It was him and Saka. And then, injuries, but it doesn't really explain. It's just this big, vague question mark. Here's my little theory based on nothing very much. Saka, as I've kind of said before, is kind of an old man. Even when he was 19, 20, he's just very wise. Like, I remember when I was 21, 22, 23, I was a kid. I was a fool. I was an idiot.
I did 19, 20, 21 and properly, so I don't remember them at all.
Like I was a fool. I was an idiot. You see them eating their chips in the canteen. They're the two of them on in the All or Nothing, and they're like, wouldn't it be cool if today we scored a goal, you and me? And it's all this like kid stuff, and like one of them was a kid, and one of them was an old man. I think Emile Smith Rowe. He's had his challenges with fitnesses, this, that, and the other, and been out of it, and like he's probably a bit of a kid, a good guy. Nothing, he was Mr. Mars bars, and like I've learned I should eat my vegetables, and like I just think we look at the two of them, maybe assume it's pretty close in terms of maturity. Emile Smith Rowe is probably a bit of a kid, and Arteta, like we've seen with the academy kids, he's not letting you on the pit. It's not Arsene Wenger days. He's not going to sheep dip you. He's not going to let you onto the pit. There are no soft entries except for the whole. You could talk about the Ethan Nwaneri thing, but I think that was a specific time and situation. We lost players to Chelsea Academy. I wouldn't be surprised if Per walked around with the crew and said, "Look, we need a solid here. We need to send a signal to the academy." It was a one-off. Give us 5 minutes, because there's been nothing like it. Like even on the summer tours, he's like, this is for grown-ups. This is the grown-up. You walk across this, you can train with us. And like if you're a kid in the academy or coming through the ranks, training with these guys, we're now at a level where it's an honor to train up against these guys. That's enough for you. It wasn't before, like it was a ragtag bunch of guys in the first team and the squad, and the kids would come. Now there's a line you cross. And so I think Emile Smith Rowe falls in a very unique place. Talented, much more experienced than the academy kids, blooded, has a bit of a resume behind him, but did not yet have the mature. We've seen it with Nuno, right? We've seen it with other players where they're just not at, not just football talent-wise, at professional grade level of how you carry yourself in a squad. So I think it's stuff in that area because he's got the talent. Now, to your original question, will we see him more than once? No idea, but God, I hope so. He's talking about him in terms of how serious and professional and how, like, those are the things you want to hear. And look, like if he gets it right, if Smith Rowe comes in, and we've seen a little bit of this with other players, comes in and contributes and is a real impactor in the second half of the season, look at the message it sends across the squad, up and down the football side of the organization that says, we demand the top. You can't come in and get experience with us. You can't come in and, you're a kid on the way up and we're going to give you an attaboy. You join the first team. You step on that pitch with those guys when you were ready, when you were serious, when you're professional, when you've done your work to get there. And so that's what I hope it means. I think if he gets on the pitch once, which he has just, look at all the other times he could have got a freebie, a start here or there. I think this is a sign that there will be more games. And you make me laugh when you say about Elliot always does this shit about, I think he'll get 0 minutes for the rest of the season, and then I bite and I go nuts and I have a bet with him and I lose. So I'm glad I missed out on this one. But Scott and I had an argument about a discussion about Nelson and Smith Rowe, and I'm like, Nelson's much more trusted than Smith Rowe. This was fairly early in the season, and Scott pointed out actually they've been used basically the same amount, and I absolutely no, they have not. I had in my mind that Arteta was still starting to trust Nelson, but in reality, he hadn't really. Turned out Nelson had 33 minutes and Smith Rowe had 11 minutes at that point. It was probably like 8 games into the season. And I'm like, you see, he trusts him 3 times as much. So it's been we're starting to see Nelson come into the picture, and maybe now it's calmed down a bit. We're seeing Smith Rowe with a serious start. Okay, it's Nottingham Forest, but it's a critical game away from home, and he absolutely needed a performance, and he trusted him. I think Smith Rowe was pretty good.
Yeah, I think like there's so much, Clive, that's interesting about this because, as Paul said, we're just missing a whole load of information. Like, as far as we're concerned, Smith Rowe was in the team. He had some injuries, and we never saw him again, and we don't really know why. And so, I still think I would surmise that there was a loss of faith in him. I don't think we signed, certainly not Vieira and Trossard, unless there was like real faith in Smith Rowe. But at the same time, we don't really have very much. But then what you could do, you could go the other way and say, well, what we've got now is he's got a Premier League start, as Paul said, in a big game that we had to win, which goes for all Premier League games now. And we know that the question about whether he was sold last summer, the club said no chance, no way. About whether he goes out on loan in January, we know the club said absolutely no way, he stays. So there has been a conviction to keep him. I think the other interesting thing is, though, this summer, he's going to have 2 years left on his contract. So I do feel like we are coming to a stick or twist point with Smith Rowe. How did you interpret, if anything, the fact that he was started in this game? Or do you just think it was Vieira wasn't fit? We kind of wanted to save Havertz for Liverpool. Do you think there's a lot to read into this?
Yeah, I'm not a dreamer when it comes to Smith Rowe. The player that we broke into the team doesn't even play in the same position any longer. But yet we still want him to play. There you go. He should play. So our memories, positionally, it's not even the same position, right? So now he's become more of an interior rather than playing on the outside and dashing up and down the left wing. Where for a period, he was literally our best forward. Remember that period around the Burnley game? Remember that 0-0 draw when he was hot, we were hot. He was that good in that period. I think we came 5th that season. So I've seen the heights, the Villa game when he scored against Villa on that night game. I've seen it. I've seen when he's been that really fiery player that we weren't sure if he was ahead or behind Martinelli. He was a 50-50 toss-up. That isn't the player we have today. Physically, he looks different. And the system we play is a little bit different, and he seems to be more suited on the inside of the pitch. I do think when we brought Trossard in, I don't think anyone complained because we were looking at a wide forward-ish anyway in Mudryk. We end up with Trossard, so that seemed to be a gap. Vieira came out of the blue, but I always felt Vieira was for the right side of the pitch rather than the left side of the pitch, so I didn't see it as a complete mirror. I think Trossard is the one that's closest to him in profile, and Trossard has delivered. And to be fair, Smith Rowe, the reason why I don't get over the top on it is the one thing we don't know is the injury history, the record, the true detail of what he went through and how they tried to manage that. You know, you see Vieira's had an operation recently. Sometimes I feel Arsenal do not want to operate too soon. They want to try everything else and then operate. And while we're watching them play, it may be in pain, we're judging them in pain, and it may not be a fair judge. You know, so I'm very conscious not to judge him. He played against Sheffield United and Nottingham Forest. There is 2 starts this season. What's unique about those 2 teams? They're probably 2 of the lower block teams, we say Brentford, and we're going to have the ball. And he is an on-the-ball player. And those are sort of games, there are plenty of those games for us in the Premier League now. Hence why I think he has value in these scenarios. And I think he has value in the higher level contest as a finisher, who's quite secure on the ball and he can run through teams. So my summarization is I trust the club on this one because I think a lot of it's to do with injury and injury recovery. And what we don't know is how he trains and what he's producing his numbers. I'm pleased to see him come back to the squad and be connected. And I look at him and say, we may have found a player that we can use. And I think that's the message. We have found a player we can use. And if I'm Smith Rowe, I'm saying, Trossard's 29, 30. I can do what he can do. I need to show you I can stay fit like he stays fit. I need to show you I can do assists like he does. I need to be maybe second or third off the bench like he is. That's my next step. And if I can do that, then you can sell Trossard. And I'm a homegrown player and I have real value for you. And then you can recontract me, say Christmas time, well, 18 months to go, and off we go. If I'm him, that's my goal. And then once I get to Trossard's level, I want to get into that team. I've got to push people hard. Maybe I've got to play false 9 on occasions, as well as left 8, and maybe right 8. You know, who's to say the captain's untouchable on occasions? So there's a role here for him. And I don't think we should be throwing away an English player without seeing him healthy for at least a year, a full calendar year. We haven't seen that yet. And if he doesn't do it this calendar year, we can make a decision maybe this time next year. Either you sign or it's time to try your luck elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, and I think like if we lost him, we'd probably have to replace him, and it feels to me like there's more urgent ways to spend our money than that at the moment. I think you make a great point about finding a player as well. If you want to find a player, this is the stage of the season to do it. When there's a couple of months to go, like, listen, we hope it doesn't happen, but we might lose Erdegaard for 3 months. We don't know. He get a kick on the ankle on Sunday, and that could be it. And we might need someone there, and it might be him. So, like, these things, they can change quickly, and if that is the case, then yeah, I'd rather that like Smith Rowe wasn't growing roots on the sub bench. Paul, one of the other interesting things I want to zoom in on from the Nottingham Forest game. On the instant reaction, Clive was talking about how these games wreck your brain a little bit against these deep blocks, because it's actually very difficult to judge what's good, and like how far is it just really, really difficult, and nearly every team struggles with it most of the time. But I guess if you zoom out, we've played 2 deep blocks. We won 5-0 and 2-1, which if Man City had done it, we'd probably look at and say that's about par. But obviously, we're not Man City, and we have had issues with this. But I wanted to talk to you, Paul, about Gabriel Jesus in that context, because I was in the away end on Tuesday night, and I gather a lot of the online discourse, and I admit to falling into this myself during the game, of just being like, oh my God, we're playing another deep block. Our number 9 doesn't seem to be getting in the area enough. And, you bring your priors into the game. But actually, when you come away from the game, Gabriel Jesus scores a goal, makes another, hits the post. Like, that's quite a good all-round centre forward performance if you take it in isolation and you don't have all these anxieties of those 3 games where we couldn't score, or the fact that Gabriel Jesus hadn't scored since, like, I don't know, last Christmas or something. So what did you take from, first of all, how did you respond to it at the time? I guess the question of the attack, but Gabriel Jesus in particular, and how do you look at it now a couple of days remove?
Yeah, look, I'm generally of the more annoyingly positive variety on this kind of thing. But I definitely share that angst that we have not, Clive hates this word, clicked in terms of our attacking thing. Like, just to upset myself and the rest of you, you look at Liverpool and you suddenly see something that's clicking. It just feels, and they just feel, that the goals are going to come. And we've seen Luis Diaz come back before and other players come back before, but without the goals. We've seen Jota come back, be fit or fittish, as fit as far as we can tell, and not have his goals with him. And then suddenly it seems to click. Sorry, Clive. And so I don't feel that's the area of the pitch it hasn't clicked. Like you say, do we get marks for busyness? Like, it was good busy. There's also something goes on with the game like a Nottingham Forest, which is you want to score early, change the game. You want to score after 20 minutes, after 40 minutes. It's also the inevitable reality that you're also stressing them, not physically as much as psychologically, but also physically. Psychologically, their attention, the gaps get big. You often see it, that nothing's substantially changed that we can tell at the start of the second half, and the other team's different. Or 60, 70 minutes into it, the gaps get a little bigger. You get half a yard. They've done it 100 times. They're comfortable. You bring on an extra player. Something changes around 60, 70 minutes. So on this game in particular, as long as we didn't get sucker punched, I did think it was inevitable, even if it felt like a lot of the same and we weren't breaking through, and like they always seem to find a way. I just think if I'm the coach of their side in that situation, I'm thinking, we're going to crack at some point. That Dutch boy, his finger, the dike, like at some stage, the boy is going to lapse unconscious. His arm's going to turn blue, and like it'll slip out of the hole, and the water will start to come through. And so there was an inevitability here. But it's also a small sample size. When you talk about Gabriel Jesus, in any one game, you look at any one player from an attacking standpoint, they're going to get 2, 3, 4 good looks. And you're going to say, you can't miss from there, or that's a 50-50. It's probably not. It's probably a 25%, a 15%. It feels like a 50-50. So it's a small sample size. You look over a bunch of games, then you got enough data. And like, he's just a little bit behind XG. So, but I still have that feeling that he doesn't hit as often as he should, that there are good striker types. He does get his goals, it seems, but good striker type situations, like the one where he hit the post and it's off the inside. I mean, like that's a good striker situation. Would have loved that one to go in rather than the between Matt Turner's legs. If I get to choose between the goals. So, and it just gives you more confidence that you're going to take the chances you get. And like, we didn't take the chance we got, is my feeling. And then he does this great thing, goes to the byline, great movement, classic Gabriel Jesus, doesn't waste a second because they could have closed in on him. They lapsed, he got in there. He's fantastic for us. He gives the team so much, he creates for other players. But I wish he'd do the more strikery goals a bit more, and we'd feel a little better about him, even if he sneaks it up in other areas and he's actually pretty close to his XG.
Yeah, I was happy with
Can I
that
add
chance.
one other point? Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
All our leading players, if I saw it right, are close to our XG. And our overall, like, we need more XG is the real answer.
Yeah, exactly. Like I didn't worry too much about that missed chance because I was like, that's like, if you keep doing that, you're going to score.
Yeah.
And to your point about Gabriel Jesus's goal, I mean, not to cast too many aspersions, but I believe Nottingham Forest have been trying to sign a goalkeeper all day, which I'm not sure what that says for Matt Turner, who's already been dropped once this season. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm still just not there. And Clive, you used a really good word on the instant reaction, I think, or maybe the last podcast where you talked about us squinting. And I think the reality is it's just going to take a few games for that anxiety of the New Year period to go away. And we're going to have to do it a few times because it feels like Palace, we kind of went, yeah, but they were set piece goals that opened it up nice and early. And then on this occasion, if you told me before the game we'd play a low block, we'd wear them down, and then like 60th minute, 70th minute, or whatever it was, bang, bang, we'd score twice. You'd think, okay, that's good. We've dominated. We've worn them down. The game hasn't opened up because of an early goal. We've had to work for this, and we've done it. And they're both really good moves as well for both goals. So, I guess, like, how much are we just squinting here? And like, there's just no way we can be happy that we're past this. Oh my God, we've got a problem scoring goals until we do it more often. Or like, how much do you come down on well, you know what? Actually playing low blocks like this is just really, really hard. What's your whole impression of like Arsenal versus the low blocks?
And Forest have the lowest, didn't they? The good thing, we're so lucky with Twitter now. Someone can send us a diagram and we can see that Forest have the lowest block in the whole Premier League. And so you compare to Palace, who decided for some reason to try to press us, play high but play low. You know what I mean? Into a back five. And of course, we scored 5 goals, right? Funny that. It seems similar to Europe, isn't it? When you try to come and get us, we knocked 4 or 5 past you. So you can see why teams do go low. Brentford went quite low, didn't they? And West Ham didn't they? That's why we had 77 touches in their box. And so there's a method to try to literally stand in front of the penalty spot with bodies and try to protect the area, knowing we have to come in there and we may not have the physical players to execute in that area. So what does it make us think? So as fans, we then go, okay, we need a centre forward. And we do need a centre forward, I feel. But we need a centre forward that brings something else, which is a bit more physicality. Centre forward play, the way Jesus played it, and this game really showed it. And I'd love to know what the feeling was in the away end, Tim. But this game really showed it for me. Well, 2 games. I was behind the North Bank in the West Ham game, and Jesus was struggling in that game. And funny enough, he didn't play against Fulham afterwards, so maybe there was something we don't know about injury-wise. And he was struggling, and Eddie came on, and suddenly he had 2 headers crashing the back post left-hand side. But when he was in that central area, mate, I promise you, he wasn't showing for the ball. And I thought, I don't like that. Forget you not scoring. You got to show. You got to show. As soon as Eddie came on, relinquished him, he was outstanding for 5-10 minutes and maybe could have got us a goal. In this game, it was quite clear to me that he does a lot of his work on the outside of the box and he drives in from the outside. And his better chances all came from outside the box coming inside. And that's who he is. And that's fine. So what did we do? We bought Havertz, who likes to run 2 centre forward. What did we ask Granit Xhaka to do last year? Run 2 centre forward. What does Smith Rowe need to do this year if he wants to play in this team? Run 2 centre forward. Because that guy is going to run out of that space. So it's not always about being a centre forward. It's about how you arrive into that area. So you can be 5'9", but you must attack the box so you can get the leverage if it's in the air, or you can beat people on the sprint, Gary Lineker style. Sprint into the first near post, sprint to the pitch of the ball, but you've got to be travelling. I don't want a static centre forward that just stands there and doesn't move. I don't think that suits us. You know, that's why we're linked to Victor Osimhen. He's not static. He's a crusher. He's a presser. He's a chaos merchant. He's not static. Look at Darwin Núñez. He looks like a centre forward, but he's not static. He crashes. He runs channels. He kicks the ball against the post when he's 3 feet out, but you can't miss him. He's all energy, loads of touches in those areas, and that chaos factor, I think we need to embrace a bit more. I felt so. I when you're watching the game, this is back to my low block. Here we go, and your heart sinks, and you go, okay. I wish we had a big guy there just to head it in for us. Do you know what I mean? And we all go there, don't they? That emotion, we all go there. But then when you think about how we play, and then you think about how we rotate, I question myself, is that what we need? An inactive totem pole? I don't think we can carry those guys. They've got to be able to move, got to be able to press. Where we're focused on is off the ball, getting it back and controlling teams and strangling teams. And Tim, I can remember us having conversations a few years ago about you not enjoying Man City. Remember those conversations we used to have? And I wonder if there's a little bit of that happening as we get so much better at strangling people that people may not be enjoying the perfection of what we're trying to do. We literally win it back within 5 passes. I looked at Nottingham Forest PPDA, which is 50 odd passes, right? So we are killing teams like we've never done before, but maybe our heart rates are a little bit steady. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And we've had conversations, haven't we, about the atmosphere diluting a little bit this season. I definitely think that's a part of it, that a lot of the games fall into these patterns. Paul, you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to do some really exciting podcasting by looking at the XGs for our players. Because, I do have the feeling players need to put the ball in the back of the net, especially the more strikery or attacking players. But overall, our XG to actual goals is pretty equivalent. Now, you got a couple of penalties stuck in there. But our goals, we're at 43. Our XG for goals is 40.6, so we're slightly ahead. So we're actually finishing slightly better. Our non-penalty XG is 36, so we've got about 4 goals worth of XG in our mix. And then you go down to players, and they're all about on track. Odegaard has a couple of penalties, which boosts him, or he'd be basically half a goal behind. He's half a goal behind on real goals. Jesus is 4 goals in reality, 5.3 in XG. So he is the laggard there. And it's not a huge sample size, but we see it season to season. So there's definitely something there. But across the whole wash, player by player, Havertz, we gave him a free goal with a penalty. Otherwise, he's like for like. Eddie's ahead by a goal. Trossard's on par. Gabby's ahead by a goal. Basically, they're all doing fine against their XG. They're all finishing what they should. what we really need is more XG. So all the good play, and we've seen this, we've had really good play in and around and getting into and control in the attacking third, getting into the box, lots of touches in the box, not enough good chances, good opportunities, and part of that can be the movement. It's really about what Clive's talking about, the movement, getting into positions, getting ball meeting guy at back post of the right height, mindset, and kind of movement. So we need more XG, more movement, more clicking in the final third, more clicking in the box, as opposed to guy needs to put the ball in the net more often.
Yeah, definitely. And I personally, I'd like to see some of those rotations between Gabriel Jesus and Gabriel Martinelli come back. I think that'd go a long way to reigniting both players. And Clive, to your point about Jesus, player likes to start wide and come in. Well, why is that? Jesus hadn't played centre forward till he was 18. He was a winger. So that's what his training is. So that's what his instinct is. And I feel like we saw a lot better stuff last season when those two were rotating more. I feel like those rotations have stopped, and we ask certainly Martinelli to be a much more fixed presence on that left-hand side. And I wonder if we can do that.
Martinelli to do that, Tim, or do you think he's just doing that? Because you watched the game at the
Could be.
weekend. Did you notice Saka coming over to the left-hand side?
Yeah.
We'd imagine he's got similar instructions. So why is he roaming and Martinelli not? You know, so it's interesting, isn't it? And I think I agree with you. He needs to roam. He needs to travel. If you're centre forwards traveling, well, you need to travel. You know, and so that's if we're gonna have 5'8" forwards who are sharp and sprinty, then they need to move. You know, and they can't be fixed. They can't be fixed to be kicked. And so I just wonder, we can never tell, right? You can't say yes or no because we don't know, do we? Well, but I wonder, we are seeing more rotations from Odegaard and Saka particularly, and I would love to see it for Martinelli.
Yeah, and maybe if Smith Rowe plays more, you get a bit more of rotation between Smith Rowe and Martinelli, for example. I tend to think maybe the reason Smith Rowe doesn't play on the left anymore is physical. I know from experience when you get a groin/pelvis issue, I quit football at 34 because I had the turning circle of a man 20 years 20 years older than me. So when your turning circle goes, that's a big thing to lose. And maybe Smith Rowe hasn't lost that forever. Maybe he's getting that back. I don't know. But if he comes into the team, maybe there is a bit more fluidity. I don't know. But to close on the Forest game, Paul, I'll ask you a fairly short and fairly simple question, I guess. Not least because it wasn't hugely addressed on the instant reaction because no one had really knew it had happened until just before the end. But I didn't see this because I was legging it for the last train. But Zinchenko and Ben White, having a bit of a contretemps on the field at the final whistle about the goal that Nottingham Forest score. Now Arteta comes out afterwards and says, "That's brilliant. I love that the players are holding each other to account." Sure, that's true to a degree. I'm sure he also thinks privately there's a time and a place to hold one another to account. How did you? We have seen this before. Was it last season? Gabriel and Saliba had like a little bit of a disagreement on the pitch at the final whistle, and we haven't seen any like reappearance of that or anything. Where do you stand on Zinchenko and White and the Lemmy Adam on the pitch at the final whistle?
I'd be worried if it doesn't happen. Like in isolation, was that great? Probably not. But overall, I think it's good. Here's Ben White. We have this opinion he doesn't even watch football. He doesn't get he does. It's not what he said. He loves playing football. He just doesn't want to watch other mugs. He's got other things to do with his time to watch other mugs playing. Like the guy loves playing. He loves competing. He doesn't like the other left back sucking at being a left back at times. And he decided to tell him. And Arteta's probably thinking, thank God somebody's giving somebody a bollocking without me having to give everybody a bollocking or finding a way to, sometimes you want somebody to get stuck in, to raise the ante, and then everybody else looks at it and thinks, well, okay, I don't want to get called out for what I do. You got to have standards and you got to be pissed off. And yes, it's not the right time and the place, but they're both nice fellas. So it's going to be fine. good relationships, it can absolutely absorb it. It tells you that it wasn't about a one-off thing. It's probably a recurring irritation for him and a couple of other players. I'm totally projecting here, and I got no basis for this, but they probably get a bit pissed off that Zinchenko from time to time doesn't full back the way he ought to when he could. And every now and then it boils over. And like I'm there thinking, yeah, get one in for me too. I love Zinchenko. I wish he'd full back a little bit more. And like sometimes things will boil over. Certainly, I think it's a nothing burger. I'd be worried if Ben White didn't feel like boiling over about things from time to time. Ben White loves football. He just doesn't watch other people playing it.
That's fair enough. And I'll stay with you on this, Paul, because this might be a good way of segueing off of the Forest game and into the Liverpool game. Zinchenko historically, I think, we've started to see, and Arteta has started to learn this season, that bit of a 75-minute player, maybe. And on this occasion, there's a lapse, whoever's at fault in the last minute again. Where would you stand?
Let's just say he's an organizing principle for the other team of what to do when they need a goal. Let's bang it over there. Is it Zinchenko's fault? We don't really care. Good things happen when we bang it over there.
Yeah. So I guess, is there a lesson learned in that maybe Kivior should have been on 75 minutes? Or is that wise after the event and actually we're 2-0 up, we've got about 98% of the ball, let's keep having 98% of the ball by having Zinchenko on? And I guess to segue on to Sunday, how concerned are you about Zinchenko playing at left back? We're not going to have Tomiyasu back. We're definitely not going to have Yuri and Timber back. Not sure which of those would be a bigger miracle, actually. But neither of those things are going to happen. I think we can probably say that wouldn't really want to see Kivior start this game, that none of us have seen enough of him at left back anyway to say, oh yeah, let's definitely put him in this game. We suspect that Mo Salah won't start this game. Like, do you think maybe we should have done our usual Zinchenko off on 75 minutes? And how anxious, if at all, are you about another one of those Zinchenko lapses on Sunday?
Basically, like when generals draw up their battle maps and they're trying to work out where they're going to attack the opposition, you can imagine that the battle on Sunday, they'd be thinking, how do we take advantage of that area? Because even if Zinchenko does okay, right, we're now kind of skittish and nervous. So other players either back off to defend their guy thinking Zinchenko will beat, or they overcompensate and overhelp him and leave like you just get that nervous feeling, right? And if we have it, I suspect, based on Ben White's reaction, and like maybe a bit of this was the psychology of going into Sunday, they're kind of keyed up that Forest was an important game to get themselves right, that the clean sheet was essential, and like they're pissed, absolutely, and it speaks to a sense of vulnerability within the team. It wasn't just a moment. It's like, this is where our problem is. We need to fucking get it fixed. Excuse my language. Did I ever apologize for cursing before on the podcast? I don't think I ever did. I'm growing. The podcast membership and listenership is maturing. I apologize for that. But I think that's the battleground, right? They had the marauding Connor Bradley, I guess, for Liverpool. I suppose TAA may play, seeing as he made an appearance here. And each of them has a different challenge on that side to put up against Zinchenko. I'm absolutely sure that's where they're going to apply maximum pressure to see if we blink and how we blink. And he's absolutely a 70-minute player for me. He wasn't a starter at City. He was a rotation option. They'd often play, what was his name, Cancelo on the left, where originally he was an on the right guy. But, I mean, the guy could play anywhere, but they would play him ahead of Zinchenko. So he wasn't a starter for them. He wasn't a 90-minute player for them. He's a fantastic tool. He's not a 95-minute player. He backs against the wall. I mean, it's just you get him off at 70 minutes basically after he's done his work and put you in a position to take it home. Or you bring him on at the end to do something tactical, but you have him covered by other more defensive players. You probably have a couple of solid midfielders on the DM types on the pitch, and you got your numbers there, and you bring him on to do something tactical and keep the ball and blah blah blah. But yeah, you don't keep him across 90 minutes if you're stretched.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I think you can't get away from the character of a player, and often, you know, the character of a player makes them who they are. So for Zinchenko, the fact that he's so calm kind of makes him who and what he is, because he can just knock the ball about. He's happy to come into midfield without getting nervous or anything like that. And that, like, 95% makes him the player he is. But it's also kind of his fatal flaw as well, is that sometimes he's a bit too relaxed. And sometimes he just lets that intensity drop a bit more. And I'm with you, Paul. If you're an opponent and you're looking at the Arsenal defence and you're looking at Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel and Zinchenko, like, if you're aiming at someone, I know who you're aiming at out of those four. And I'd include Declan Rice in that as well. You're certainly not aiming at him. So,
one of the things you do in a battle is you plant a flag somewhere, or you carry a standard, or you have the bagpipes, and it's kind of a rallying point. It doesn't actually mean it's a better place than any other place. It's just the place, and everybody knows it. And basically, Zinchenko is the place that the opponent can use as a rallying point, even if it were just as strong as the other side. But different. It's just like, this is easy. Here's an easy plan. Let's work this. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. But like, here's our organizing principles. Zinchenko's side. Let's bang it over there. Now, he's actually pretty good in the air. Like, he's very good at certain things defensively and fullbacking. But you also know that you'll get some change out of that if you bang it in there, put it under pressure. Other player, Gabriel will have to cheat out there. We'll do different things to compensate. So Arsenal will compensate in that area, creating space or opportunity. And Liverpool are very good. Like, they're so aggressive with the running and the athleticism and the movement. And they're really good at triangles. I mean, okay, this isn't their A team in terms of triangles, but they're getting there now with Jota and Luis Diaz. And yeah, I think they'll look to create confusion on that side, and where we hesitate, they'll find a gap. So yeah, that's the battle.
Yeah, and that's what Liverpool's whole model is based on, right? Creating confusion, creating chaos, bringing the temperature of the game up, and kind of making it messy and transitional. And Clive, I'll give you both this question, really, because it's kind of a free swim question about this game. But we're not going to be playing a deep block in this game, that's for sure. Could this game maybe suit us more? And I guess more to the point, we've played Liverpool twice recently, like in the last 5 weeks. So both teams know each other pretty well at this stage. What can we learn from those games against Liverpool recently to take into this game? And how relieved are you that we're not going to be playing against 25 Liverpool defenders in the box?
I think the Liverpool game in the Cup, I think, was the first turning of the new page for me, tactically. And so what I think we've done a little bit more, and I saw it for myself versus Palace. I'm not sure if you felt it in the stands, Forest, Tim, but we tend to be attacking a lot more on our left-hand side than we have done previously. And so by that, the way you control your defensive weakness is by having your offensive distances on that side be a little bit tighter. So you've seen Odegaard come over onto that side. Rice is already sort of in the middle, but he leans toward the left. Zinchenko's on the left. And so we're building up in smaller passes on the left-hand side. Jesus comes out to the left. We draw everyone over to the left-hand side, and then we switch the point of the attack. So in the end, you've heard me use the phrase game model. I don't like using phrases without trying to explain what that actually is, right? So a game model, you have 4 phases of the game. You have organized attack, so what you're doing in your attacking shape. organised defence, which I think is Zinchenko's weakest part of the game. You have defensive transition and you have offensive transition. What do you do in those phases? And you build your training plan around those 4 areas. I think if you look at Arsenal right now, I think we've worked very hard on our organised attack to be slightly less extremities on both sides, and then everyone knows where you're going and everyone just shuffles over. I think we try to be a little bit more relationism wise on the left hand side to then switch the point of the attack. It's funny how Saka's output's gone up a lot more and he seems to be beating his man a lot more. Why? Because he's not always doubled. Why? Because they're attracted over to the left hand side. What does that do for you as well? It protects Zinchenko as well in front of him. So I'm seeing a difference here. I'm seeing them try to address problems. When a team literally sits on a 6-yard box, it's not so clear. But Palace, it was clear because I kept thinking, what has Saka done to upset everybody? Why is he not getting the ball like he always does for the first 20, Tim? And I definitely, I definitely saw it versus Liverpool. And funny enough, it was Reece Nelson that showed me it really, and Odegaard's movement. And so I can see us moving more towards this. And I like it. Because if we can get Saka into those situations more often, I'm feeling he's really inputting the team, whether he drops deep to build, whether he stays high to drive inside, I don't mind. If we can just make sure he's freed up, if that means maybe he's not so partnered up with Odegaard, do you see what I mean? Because everyone knows he's going there, and then we can build on left-hand side. And I think Smith Rowe is part of that evolution. I think Havertz will be part of it. I think we've seen Trossard out there. So where are the changes coming? They're coming out left-hand side. And maybe different skill sets are required in the game. So I think where did Liverpool's best attack come from? Their right-hand side. So you can see if we load left, you see what happens there? We block that side and we need to get pressure on the ball to stop the entry pass into our back line. So that for me would be the game plan. How can we pressure their right half of the pitch? Make sure Saka has a second detail, which is to stop Van Dijk doing those big diags. So he has to come off the right and be one of our best defenders to make sure when Van Dijk gets it, you go for him regardless what happens. And if Joe Gomez wants to be the guy that splits our defence, we'll take that. Do you know what I mean? We'll take that. But you've got to stop those diags from Van Dijk. So I'm really looking forward to this game, Tim. I really am. We went to Anfield last year 2-2. We never controlled that game for maybe 50 minutes. We were all hiding behind the settee, weren't we? Went to Anfield this year, we drew 2-2, and they were fairly glad to see the final whistle. It's like okay, we're both quite good sides. Bit of respect we got for the first time, I feel, at Anfield. The cup game, let's be honest, we should have won the game. We kicked our own net first. I'm not sure they wanted to win it even. We should have won the game. We were way better than them. We just blew it. And they're going to come to this game, and we're going to control them. We're going to control them again. It's what we do during those control periods. And I won't go on too much longer. I do want to talk about control and how we're doing it. But I don't think we're seeing our team because we're controlling teams we've never done before. But we're focused on the last action, and we can't see our improvement because the last actions are not going in enough to see where we actually are. So we need some of that to happen on Sunday. Then I think we'll see the other parts that we've improved this year that we're not quite focusing on at the moment.
Yeah, that's really well said. And Paul, I'll give you a bit of a free swim question, but maybe anchor it to something a bit more specific about the lineup. I mean, I think coming into this game, we can probably all pick the back four, largely through a lack of choice and depth as much as anything. We probably know what the front three is going to be as well. Maybe Trossard gets in there, but otherwise I think definitely Saka and Jesus will be starting unless there's an injury. We know Rice and Odegaard will start if they're fit. So it kind of really, it comes down to that left 8 position again, which nobody has totally nailed this season. And I wonder what you're expecting from this game, because Clive referenced the cup game. We started Havertz up front on that occasion and put Nelson in behind. I'm sure we're not going to do that this time. And I'm sure there's a degree to which we were saving Havertz for this game. But do you definitely think it'll be Havertz, or could you see Smith Rowe starting again, Trossard starting there? Like, how do you think Arsenal will shape up for this game in terms of lineup and approach?
I mean, my guess is going to be Havertz here. He's too much for Smith Rowe at this point. That would be quite the change in responsibilities and trust. Trossard isn't midfieldy enough. He can get run over, run past, and this is going to be very physical, athletic, potentially running Liverpool team that you got to run with it. Szoboszlai, those kinds of players powering forward, you need to be able to run with them. And I think Havertz is a bit hit and miss. He's really good at certain aspects, nicking the ball, the telescopic leg. He's good at the shirt pull. He's good at the rolling over, getting free kicks, which are actually all useful. But he can also be a bit kind of light in that, I had my go, light in the tackle, got run past. So it's definitely a choice to be made. I do wonder if there's the Jorginho Rice option in midfield and use a little more Jorginho control craft and give Rice kind of the roving midfielder. Not that he's necessarily sitting deep, but he's free to chase the action and win the ball. So I could see that one, and we just trust. We keep it a little closer to Jorginho, and we trust the trade off there, and that gives Rice ability to cover for Zinchenko, who's going to be in a fairly similar area of the pitch, but Rice can then compensate behind, in and around him, run with Trent, run with whoever on that side. So I definitely see mileage in this one. I think it's the encouraging thing recently, even though we haven't been necessarily totally clicking in the box with finishing the obvious striker kind of situations, is we've had good chance and good success at the kind of counter-attacking or the kind of turnover. Suddenly there's some open play and some open space, and we run, we capitalize, we put the ball in the back of the net. And I think there could, we're not going to have to thread the needle on this game. They're not going to be that deep in their box. And so they're going to be more, the kinds of goals we've been scoring recently are the kinds of opportunities I expect us to be getting in this game.
Yeah, Clive, you want to come in on that? I think the Jorginho Rice, that's a really interesting one. And Clive, I was going to come on to you on the midfield and what you think it will look like. But yeah, go for it.
No, I think for myself, when Paul said Jorginho Rice, I went, But I tell you what I've been doing in the last couple of days. I've been listening to I don't know if you've seen this. It's a BBC show about Pep Guardiola and his history at Barcelona and how he developed his career there. I've been listening to that, and when you listen to that, and I've listened to some Joe and Cruyff stuff as well, you can see clearly why Arteta bought Declan Rice. I mean, he is that Busquets guy. He is that guy, and he will be that guy for us. And I and ahed if he's going to be an 8 or a 6, but actually, he is that guy. So I see Rice staying there, and that's going to be his future for us. If I'm from a change perspective, I would play Havertz and I would play Trossard, and I would just put those two guys in. I loved what Martinelli did in the cup game when he came on late. I love what he did against City when he came on at half time. I think at this moment in time, he could be a massive impact for us. I don't think his confidence is right at the top of the house to start. He would do fine. I can hear people saying, yeah, but he always does well against Trent. Well, we can control the ball and then bring him on to murder Trent late in the game. Do you see what I mean? And I think having that extra pace, that's what Liverpool do. They bring on Gakpo, they bring on people like that. They bring on Jota who didn't start, and they give you another problem to solve. And that's what we've got to have, that comfort as fans, that we can beat teams twice if we have to. And I think what Klopp is very good at, is understanding what the game is telling him, and making a change. Way better than that Smile is telling you. He's very, very smart. And so we need to have weapons on the bench that we can react to anything and cause him a problem. So I will start with Trossard and Havertz, and I'll be using Smith Rowe and Martinelli as forward impacts. And the Jorginho one, I love that idea, and I wouldn't be against it. But I see him as a closer, like we use him on Tuesday night to just calm a game down towards the end.
Yeah, Smith Rowe, your power up, Jorginho, your power down from the bench. Paul, we're going to lose you in 1 minute, so I'm going to just ask you a pretty straight question on this game before we say goodbye. Is this must win, must not lose in terms of the title? How are you? If Arsenal lose, do you think the title's kind of gone?
So obviously it's not, because numerically all sorts of, and in reality anything can happen. But yeah, I think like you kind of got to think it is, feel it is. It kind of is. It kind of is. You definitely got to think it is. We are. They were better than us for a long time. We were better than them last year, but didn't play that way against them. This year we have been better than them, I would say, when we play them, but not across the league, because we're missing that final piece. So they will be looking to come out of this having proved the point that this is their season, and then it's them versus City. We got to take them out. They'll be, put it another way, they'll be happy with the draw. We can't be happy with the draw. And I think we got to walk out of this one having knocked them down and put them back in their place if we can do it. I think that's essential for our season. Now, of course, we can recover it. And of course, they could recover. They'll still be, a couple of points ahead. But yeah, it's basically, I think you look back at seasons, and this would be the game you'd look back in this season and say, oh, okay, that's where the title race emerged.
Yeah, we owe them one. Paul, we have to lose you. You can follow Paul on Twitter at Poznan in my pants. Thanks very much, Paul. And Clive and I will continue for a few minutes more. Clive, first of all, probably a pretty short one just on how you expect Liverpool to line up, really. Obviously, they've, even without Salah, they've got forward options. Like you said, Gakpo came on, Jota as well, and Nunez and Diaz, and they were doing lots of swapping. I'm still not sure I could tell you who was playing centre forward. But let's kind of focus on the injuries. I mean, a little bit like us and Thomas Partey, and all of a sudden he's pictured back in training the day Ghana go out of the AFCON, the day Egypt go out of AFCON. There's Mo Salah on the training pitch at Melwood. I mean, to be fair, he was in his trainers, I think, so that didn't look like full contact training to me. But do you suspect that there's any, like Trent came on right last night against Chelsea, and that I think is a fairly sure sign that, as well as Conor Bradley has done, that Trent will start this game, and we'll have to make peace with that. But what about Mo Salah? Are you expecting to see him in the squad, or do you take Liverpool at face value that he's unavailable?
I think he could be available, and I actually don't mind if he is. Honestly, I don't. Because sometimes when big names arrive in your team, what happens? You get comfortable. I think, Mo's back. Everything's going to be all right. But is he really back? And we have to work him. And sometimes it's better the devil that you know, and we know how he's going to play. Again, going back to the Anfield game, I know he scored that specific movement, and it was a great goal. Can't deny it. But I didn't feel the same fear as I used to feel with Mo Salah, where you felt you could score at any minute. I just don't feel that fear anymore with Liverpool. And if we get beat 5-0 on Sunday, then you can clip this up and send it to me. But I just don't feel that fear. I think we're really good at controlling football matches. And it's something I've been thinking about. I'm looking at what's happened, what's changed. How have we become so good at getting the ball away from people and having that mindset so they cannot even keep it? And it's a constant theme throughout the whole season. And it's something that it's sometimes the way you attack defines the way you defend. I can see a definite change in emphasis, in mindset, to the point where I think we can go to most teams in the world. In fact, I don't fear any team from a how we play them perspective. We may not win the game, and we got beat by Fulham. The one time we didn't play this season, really. We may not win the game because we don't quite have the rubber of the green. Anyone can lose a game. I think the Palace draw at City, I think it was the other week. And Forest have taken points of City. I mean, we watched Forest the other day. We can't believe they could take points of City. How can you do that? And but they beat us last season. So you can't win every game, but I think we're set up to compete at the very highest level. And I didn't feel that last year. I thought that we were really, really good. But were we really, really mature and structured to manage the biggest games? If we have to go to the Bernabeu this season, if we have to go to Bayern Munich this season, I think we have a way of playing that can survive and thrive in those arenas. And the worrying thing is, when I say that, people are going to say, I'm not too sure. And the reason why I'm not too sure is we're not quite creating the quite high quality chance, and we're not quite taking enough chances at the right period of the game for us. That's the only thing. If you add the 4 points we dropped against Fulham, we'd be talking differently about this team. Significantly differently. And it's frustrating. Maybe we're learning about where we need to improve. But while we're so focused on where we need to improve, I don't think we are seeing where we have improved. And I think we're taking that for granted. What was the vibe like on Tuesday, Tim? What was it like, the vibe in the way? And I'm really keen to know, because obviously I know they're good days up there, but I was really keen to know.
It's weird. Like, these games, like, they're boring for a start.
Yeah.
There's not a lot to get excited about watching attack v defense, particularly in the first half when it's all up the other end, and all you can, and your perspective is muddled. And actually, you don't need perspective, because what you think you see is what you see, which is a row of 11 red shirts and then like 10 guys who look like they're in steward vests running around them.
Yeah.
So it's pretty difficult to get really keyed up and create a big atmosphere. There was little bits of, and I felt this too, little bits of anxiety, like, I've got to move the ball quicker and all of that. Yeah. But actually, because it was up the other end in the first half, none of us had a good enough view to say for sure what we should be doing. Because like your perspective's all gone, and then in the second half we scored twice. But I'd say like the conversation at half time. I mean, if I had a penny for every time I heard the word striker, I'd have been able to buy a couple of pints. But like it wasn't like truly angry or frustrated. It's just those games they don't set your heart rate going, and it was so obvious so early as well. Like, I think everyone expected that the game would be a bit like this, but like Forest really went to another level of low block in this game, and like the home fans, I didn't hear a peep from them all night really, because like they can't get excited watching that either, because it's just like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to bash the ball to Chris Wood on the halfway line once every 15 minutes, and like we're not going to score doing that. So like when you fall into a pattern of, right, we're probably not even going to score because we're not even trying to counter attack, so we're hanging on for a 0-0. Like I feel like there's a distinction between, we're kind of going for 0-0, but if we can break and make it 1-0, whereas for me, Forest was just like, we're playing for 0-0, and that's kind of it. And it made for a pretty flat atmosphere, to be honest. But as someone who's like, the last train back to London left like half an hour after the final whistle, and it's like a 28-minute walk to Nottingham Station.
On your toes in, basically.
I was like, I'm going to leave when the board for stoppage time goes up, and then Forest score, and it's like, oh God, I've got to stay now. So you've got like the double anxiety going on. So I really didn't appreciate that.
Exactly.
But that's, it was flat, but not for any other reason than the game was rubbish.
I was going to say, I said on the IR, I'm not upset with Arsenal. I'm a bit more upset with seeing these games too often.
Yeah.
You can see them coming, can't you? And you think, I've been so excited about this game, and here we are again, attack versus defense drill. Do you know what I mean? And we're now killing someone because he hasn't shot. Do you know what I mean? And I do it.
And
it's not fair, really, is it? It's not fair.
I went and watched exactly the same game on Sunday, Clive, with the women, because it was exactly the same. They did exactly the same, scored twice in the second half, and it was 2-0. They didn't concede a silly one at the end. It's 2-0, and it was all right. But I watched exactly the same game twice, basically.
There seems to be too many of these games in the Premier League at the moment. And because we haven't played in January, I've had a good look around to watch other games. and that we're not the only ones in this situation. And I think it's down to coaching and how you defend. You defend by distances, and teams are really dropping in and waiting, falling over, getting a free kick, and then resetting and then going out again. They're not letting you run into zone 14, not letting you run to a penalty spot for free. There's going to be people there. And this is just maybe it's just a product of coaches and a trend in coaches, and it works. It does work if you're that team. It works, I'm afraid. So we've got to come up with different strategies. Diags to the back post, inverted crosses. I'm talking about Tim dashing, but arriving into the box. We've got to find strategies to beat this because it's not going away because it works, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. To close, the fact that we're saying this an hour and 5 minutes into the podcast probably says a great deal, but it is transfer deadline day. I think we've all known for some time that nobody was coming in. In fact, when Arteta talked about it before the Forest game, he was already talking in the past tense. So I think it's been very clear for a while, and we've known the mood music, and it's the mood music for the whole Premier League, right? At the moment, this is, the profit and sustainability rules 3-year grace period has ended. The tabs are being called in at the bar, and nobody's buying a drink anymore. So
Yeah.
I think we all understand a lot of the context around Arsenal not bringing anyone in. And we've got like youngsters going out on loan on deadline day, which is usually what happens anyway. It looks like we've managed to bravely resist all of the interest in Cedric and hold on to him, which is a huge boost for the last couple of months of the season. Obviously, like I said, the mood music has been there for a little while. But if someone had told you on, I don't know, December the 30th that we weren't going to bring anyone in, would you have been surprised by that?
The only thing I thought, not sure I was good English, Steve. See why I don't write. The only thing for me I thought we could do was get a versatile fullback. And that is just to allow cover at centre back. Because we had a fullback can play left and right. Zinchenko, we know about his legs. Tomiyasu, we knew he was going to be absent, and he's not the most robust person in the world. Timber, I don't want to even think about him this season. I thought a versatile fullback that's more attacking, like an overlapping fullback that brings us something we don't have. I was thinking we could do something like that because then Kiwior could become a centre-back cover and Ben White could be a centre-back cover. So I think we have 6 active defenders for 8 spots at the moment, I think it is. And that's 2 down. So when Arteta's talk about the thin squad, he's talking about that there. He's worried about that. Those guys are fit, touch wood, but he's worried about that. We saw Ben White running around with strapping. Not strap-ons, strapping.
I was going to say that'd be an interesting tactic.
Exactly. So basically, we saw him running around, and it didn't work, did it, until the Dubai break, right? So yeah, we need to keep those guys fit. That's the only thing I would see. We know the rules. The money is going to be available in the summer. It's not going to be available now to get the dream strikers that everyone seems to want. No one's doing it, right? So the biggest transfer of the day is Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari in 2025. I think that's the biggest story of the day, really. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ideally Arsenal would have wanted, that kind of fullback cover that you talked about, or that versatile fullback cover. I'm sure that's what they wanted above everything, knowing that, in attack, we're talking about ceiling raisers, not floor raisers anymore. Yeah. I feel like Jorginho and Trossard might have been the last floor raising signings, and now we're looking in a different category, and that doesn't tend to happen in January. If you look over the history of January transfers, it's actually quite miserable. There's not that many that look really, really brilliant, and it's not just about, teams tend to shop in January when they're a bit desperate, but also you got to look at why are players available in January. For players available in January, it's usually because they're surplus to requirements, and it's never been a great month to shop, really, over and above the kind of more opportunistic stuff. But yeah, I'm not terribly surprised that Arsenal couldn't find someone. I think what they wanted and what they could do were probably too far apart. And like I said, I think we can see across the Premier League that's the case, that people are skirting towards these kind of these profit and sustainability rules. I think one of the unfortunate byproducts of that is it's encouraging teams to sell academy talent rather than nurturing it. And I wonder if they consider that a bit of a loophole that they might want to close somehow through regulation at some point. And we're seeing some youngsters being sold. And I think James Benge, I'd point you to an article he wrote today where he's talking about why Arsenal are selling rather than loaning youth players at the moment, like a lot of teams are. So yeah, that's really the only activity it looks like that's happening around the league. So what we have is what we hold for the season, and I think you're right. We're potentially walking a bit of a tightrope, but Tomiyasu will be back at some point, and that's that will hopefully be pretty major, and hopefully he can stay fit as well, because I wouldn't mind betting, baked into the equation of wanting another kind of versatile fullback, is the fact that we're kind of relying on Zinchenko and Tomiyasu both staying fit.
Yeah.
And that's, history tells us that
it's a bit risky.
That's not a safe bet.
We got Cedric, mate, so don't worry too much. Don't worry yourself too much.
We've clung on to him. We've really clung on amid all of those Turkish clubs that were definitely very, very interested, and that was not fabricated.
Racing. They're not racing in the right direction, mate. So I go.
That might be the kind of race that I could get involved in nowadays. To be honest, like I might even win it. Dodgy hips and all, but there we go. Anyway, I think that's about all we've got time for on this episode. Like I said earlier, we've got the Clive Director of Football episode on Patreon, and I will have a bash at that some point, probably next week. Wouldn't hold your breath on that one, because my brain doesn't do structure and spreadsheets and things like that. But that actually might probably make it more fun for the listeners. It won't be much fun for me, but obviously we'll have an instant reaction as well on Sunday after the game. I am pretty sure Elliot will squeeze something in somewhere, because every time he says he's not going to do one of these podcasts, he listens to the podcast, his brain starts going, and probably about 2:00 on Saturday morning, you'll get a 25-minute Elliot monologue on Patreon. So that's not planned at the moment, but I'm sure it's coming. But until then, thank you very much for listening. Thanks so much to Paul and Clive. Thanks very much to my voice for just about holding up on this. This is the biggest examination I've given it. And it's, it hasn't Tomiyasu'd on me yet. So we will speak to you after Arsenal 10, Liverpool 0.